Hi there, I'm Trevor Coote, and this is Business is Fucking Hard, the podcast where business owners pull back the curtain and talk about the realities of owning a business. We'll hear their stories, learn some lessons, and have some fun along the way. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we are joined by Mahfuz Chowdhury. Mahfuz is the Director of Strategy for Candy Box Marketing, an author, a TEDx speaker, and a podcast host. After finding his path toward marketing in university, Mahfuz followed this passion with creativity by launching several business ideas, not all of which were successful. There is even reference to Clubhouse that Mahfuz admits he overestimated. I hope you enjoy this episode. Mahfuz Chowdry, welcome to the podcast.
Trevor, it's an honor. It's an honor to be part of a conversation that I think is much needed. And can I just say, about time? It's been long enough. Podcasting has been around long enough. So I appreciate the rawness and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, I think, it's nice to hear that it's an honor. I think that's probably going a bit too far. It's a conversation that 5 or 6 people are going to hear, but we'll see what kind of amplification we can get once we put it out.
My mom will add one more view count to your audience base. She does it out of sheer support of knowing that no one's going to listen to this, so I can appreciate it.
There you go. Well, hello to mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the breakdown, the idea is to have an open, and honest conversation, pull down the veil of business, and speak honestly and openly. And, certainly what I'm finding is just through these conversations, people sharing their stories, there's so many lessons that, unintentionally or intentionally get shared with the listener. So, let's get into it. Share with me, first of all, your introduction to business. What did your first exposure to entrepreneurialism or business look like in your journey?
I like to think that a lot of people that struggled to find their way and do well in school can probably relate to my story, and it probably becomes a little more. Yeah, basically everyone that will ever listen to this in the history of time. Imagine this shy introvert like myself that struggled to not only figure out what he wanted to do, but struggled equally as much to raise my hand and saying, I'm freaking out because I seem like the only one in the classroom that has no idea what's going on. And that was me, I would say, for my entire time in university. I clearly selected a university just to follow along and not lose my friends that were graduating from high school. And I clearly followed a path that I had no idea what I was doing. And the class I ended up signing up for was the one that's probably easier to get into than most, which is business administration, whatever that means. And somewhere along the way, I remember as much I was flunking in every class and on the verge of getting put on academic probation, there was a beautiful gift, a gift so good that it's almost worth the tuition, okay? It was a gift where I just happened to sit in a classroom that was called Marketing 101. And I was in a room full of 500 other students, probably seemed way more confident than I will ever look. And I remember sitting there being confused until there was a day where the professor, shout out to Mr. Appleby, believe it or not, his name was Mr. Appleby. And maybe that was it. Maybe that sparked the business idea that I always wanted. But what he did was he played this very strange game where he divided up the entire room of 500 students into 4 different quadrants. And each one of us had to work together as a group with our quadrant and come up with a shoe brand of our choice, a name of our choice, a style of our choice. And the rule was that we had to present it back to the room and come up with a strategy for why our shoe will succeed in this super saturated space. And I remember that I don't remember what the idea was. It probably sucked. Like, it probably lines up with all those terrible art pieces that I drew at paint class that will never see the light of day. But what I will remember for the rest of my life is how much I enjoyed it. I remember the feeling of how fun it was to take an idea and try to create some business structure around the idea, no matter how ludicrous it is, and then present it and communicate it in a way that was well received. And we definitely didn't make the top 3, which means we were in last place out of the 4. Yet I left with the best feeling in the world, which is a clarity and drive around something that I wanted to do that I continued pursuing for the rest of my life, which is entering the world of marketing and constantly thinking of bringing innovation to that space. So I owe a lot to Mr. Appleby, although he may not agree for the right reasons. But he definitely set me well on my way and on my business journey.
So that's really cool. And I'll say, I don't know that there's a lot of alignment there, but I had a similar experience in business and in university. I went to the College of Commerce initially, and but my experience was that as I got exposed to some of these different things, one of them was drastically failing a test, a self-assessment on whether you'd make a good entrepreneur or not. I failed it miserably. Mm-hmm. And instead of finding those nuances that motivated me, which it does sound like happened to you, I took all of the things I was seeing in business school and I'm like, this is not for me. And I went into sciences.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And then, and then I finished my science degree and ended up getting into business. So, the marketing piece, you're super inspired by, love that you were able to pull that piece, like you said, probably worth every penny you paid for that degree. But what about the risk aspect? What about the aspect of entrepreneurialism of business that inherent and marketing that inherently comes with accepting failure when pushing innovation? Was that part of that kind of nuance and that learning piece in university?
I can't say I could credit the university experience for why I've built an imaginary armor around me from the taste of failure, although I didn't have a choice. Failure was something I was going through whether I liked it or not. But it put me down this path of romanticizing what I can do without the idea of failure. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap of entrepreneurship, right? They get excited about the result. They get excited about the success stories. And they usually need to taste reality a little bit to really assess if they want to be an entrepreneur. And I can't say I've tasted that in the university side, but it wasn't until that romanticizing path took me down a lane of trying out things on my own, such as building out my first website and trying to create a blog and having this ambition of trying to share my ideas better on stage. And it wasn't until I realized it's not as easy as it make it to be. It's not that overnight success that you think it will be. So putting out content and realizing very, very much that it's not as easy as it's going to be. I think it's the first opportunity that you get to really gauge how badly you want this. And I think a lot of people do end up turning away, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a realization that now that you have all the information of what it takes, maybe this isn't for you. And maybe there's opportunities to do some incredible things, like maybe being an entrepreneur, for example, which still lets you do a piece of a lot of the things that you enjoy. But when you taste it, I think what happens that I've experienced, Trevor, is I kind of have to sit back and ask myself, do I love it more than the dislike of failure? Do I love doing this more than the dislike of failure? And I've very much allowed myself to experiment with it enough, in the agency world where I get to do it with clients all the time. There's a secret benefit there where you get to try out a client's idea before you try out your own and really see how much you enjoy the growth marketing side of things. I've done it enough times to really evaluate whether or not deep inside of me, it still make my heart race a little bit faster when I get to do the innovation stuff. And it truly does. And part of it could be the fact that deep down, I've always wanted to do more creative things, and I've never found a way to align monetary results and revenue as a result of innovation and creativity. And once I realized that it was possible, no amount of failure was going to stop me. So over time, not only did I get numb to the feeling of failure, but I got excited about the fact that you can reduce the failure rate if you get really, really good at the craft.
That's a really, I mean, to frame it like that, the romanticism is what kind of keeps you going, or at least gets you started into it, is kind of thinking about that outcome. But then it's the resilience that you have to have when you realize that that's not necessarily going to be realized, right? So really, really cool that the way you laid that out. Where does the romanticism live now? Do you still have some of that to bring you to that next level, or is it just really functioning on the realities of this is going to be tough no matter what, and I have to be prepared for that?
I smile and I chuckle because I think it went from romanticizing to almost an addiction that
Oh,
someone needs to take
interesting.
me far
Okay.
away from. And the reason I say that is because it's almost like you beat a video game and you just want to pick up another video game to feel what it's like to suck at a game again. And I feel like I've done that because of the fact that for some reason there's an itch that makes me want to launch new products and new initiatives just for the fun of it and just to try it out. The agency side is something I've been doing for the last 13 years and helping businesses with digital marketing. But what I do on the side is crazy because like I will just write a book and publish it for the sake of learning how to make a bestseller book. I will launch a speaking website just to try to beat my number of how many talks I can do in a year and how much revenue I can generate. My wife and I've got her with the itch. I think it's contagious. I think she picked up some of that bug because her and I collaborated on a productivity journal that we released. And over and over again, it's about starting at zero. Just like the podcast show, we started a podcast show and it started at zero. There's something that is enormously addicting about starting at zero and knowing that you can make it something. And some of them may result in a beautiful opportunity that starts paying off the bills and maybe adjust your lifestyle a little bit in the right direction. But some of them don't. And I think I'm okay with that because I get the thrill of being able to try overcoming that challenge. And I realize that although these initiatives are very isolated and you kind of focus on them one at a time, the learnings overlap significantly. When you figure out how to make one thing work, like you figure out how to make your e-commerce ads convert, that learning can now work its way into other businesses like getting more speaking events. So the fact that all learnings elevate each initiative, but at the end of the day, you don't really care if one of them crashes and burns because you have 7 other things to lean on, I think has started becoming a big part of what I love to do. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that before this year ends, there'll be plenty more initiatives that keeps letting me itch this bug. Now, you may come around, Trevor, and you may say, Mahfuz, you need help and you got to walk away from these ideas. And maybe someone needs to finally give me that wake-up call. But I got to tell you, it gives me tremendous purpose to live. Something that makes me realize that when I'm on vacation for too long, my mind starts coming back to wanting to get home just so I could get to work again.
So how do you balance, like the creativity with the commerce, the enterprise aspect? So wording that I've used before, and actually just had in the previous episode a conversation with that guest around the wording, the art of business, and that's something that I used in my TEDx. It's kind of this perception of other people looking at folks who are really successful at business and going, why are they successful at the art of business? Why do they have kind of what it takes to, and the point is that, some of it is a veil, that not everybody is as successful as they're portraying. But it sounds to me like you're really looking at the creativity side of it, this exploring, creating something, not necessarily looking at the initiative as starting it as a business. You're looking at creating something, and then if it turns into a business, how do you connect those two things, that creativity versus enterprise?
You used a word a couple minutes ago, and I think you've absolutely nailed it when you identified how much resilience and being resilient is a necessity in the world of entrepreneurship. And not only did I always feel like that was the case, I think it was very much validated during the pandemic time, because when we went through a scenario where you have a roster of clients that are either looking at pausing or stopping their marketing services and needing some direction of what to do, I was in the process of writing my newest book called The Resilient Brand. And I thought, what an opportunity it is for me to kind of pay attention to these businesses and see what they do as case studies. Like I really wanted to see if I could justify the thesis I was putting into the book and align it with some factual data and what I've observed with my client roster. So what we've kind of seen is we've followed along the journey, and fortunately, I'm happy to say that most of the businesses made it out a bit better than they went into it, and I would even say a lot of them are now in a better place than they were in because of it, which is a silver lining for many businesses. But there was an interesting observation, Trevor, and I got to tell you, it took my book down a very different direction. There was a realization that if I collected all these businesses together and I told you here are not just the survivors, but the thrivers, like the ones that really crushed it, that ones that at least 4x their revenue before the pandemic time. It was interesting because I almost would have been able to tell you with 95% accuracy of which of those business would have been, because they had two things in common that I think is worth noting, and I highlighted in my book. Number one, the spoiler has already been revealed. The resiliency was their leadership style. They focused on building resilience not only when things went bad, but when they were thriving. Even before the pandemic was even a terminology in their office, they were already hosting things like town hall meetings and private sessions and really listening to their team members about what mattered the most. But the other part of it that I thought was really interesting is one of the things we do as an agency is we facilitate a brand archetype for all of the business we work with. And the short version of a brand archetype, going back to the Carl Jung's theory about 12 personalities in an archetype, we do these for brands to figure out what is their unique personality. And out of the 12, one of the most popular one is the hero archetype, because everyone wants to be the hero of their own story. And, growing up, you watch movies like Lion King, and it goes through this journey of tragic resiliency. You come back and you're better, and now you're the king of the jungle. You see it again with Luke Skywalker. You see it again with Hunger Games. And you think that's what you want to be when you grow up. So a lot of people take on the hero leadership style. Shockingly, only 12% of the thrivers fit the hero archetype. The one that absolutely dominated at a very astronomical 72% of thrivers were actually the caregiver archetypes, the ones who care more than the competition. And to me, that was a fascinating characteristics that I saw with not only our client roster, but the associations and partners that we also took a look at. So it made me realize that even long before the pandemic, the idea of caring has never gone away in the world of entrepreneurship. And I think care automatically makes you think a little bit about how do I take more care of my customers, but I don't think it ends there. I think there's a lot to do with caring about the purpose and reminding yourself why you do what you do, even beyond just putting a mission statement up there. Caring beyond just hiring people and talented people, but really caring about what matters to them and building your organization around their ideas. I think there's an opportunity to bring care into the things that you do. And the reason that matters is when you get knocked down and you ask yourself if these failure events that are taking place is worth pursuing anymore, you come back to the ones you care about. And it's very hard to turn your back on them when things get hard, when you have a massive care that really drives the purpose behind your mission.
So, I mean, I don't want to belabor the conversation with us just keep pointing out the words that each other are using, but you used purpose, and that is such a theme that is coming up with so many of the guests. To really identify putting the purpose first and foremost, but even more than that, like the caring piece that you just highlighted, I really, really like that too. And talk to me about like your understanding of that aspect is obviously really well founded. How do business owners or yourself differentiate the care that you're demonstrating for, or how do you balance the care that you're demonstrating for your internal folks, for the people that are making the business successful, versus the customers and the clients who you depend on to grow the business, and then other stakeholders and yourself as a business owner and a leader and an entrepreneur? How does it differentiate the amount of care, the type of care, the focus related to those different areas?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, Trevor, and I'm gonna put my thought around this and see where we come back on the other side here. I think when it comes to the differentiators of why you do it and what care means with your team and what care means for your clients, I think the KPIs, right? Like the measurement of success is going to be the major differentiator. Is how do you know that you care about your team versus how do you know you care about your customers? But I think the core ingredients that allows you to be a caregiver doesn't go away. And I think it comes down to key few things. Number one, the realization that it's not an independent goal, but rather a goal that requires you to co-elevate others and rise as whether it's a community, even if you're a team of one and you're like, this doesn't matter to me, I don't have a team to listen to. Well, you still have a community. You still have stakeholders, you still have industry leaders in your space. And if you really care to a deeper level, you'll even realize that it matters to care about your customers, your competitors, rather. Really matter what matters to them, and having a good relationship with them is actually not a bad thing. And when you get to those areas, you start to realize that co-elevate means listening to other ideas to actually implement it. And can I say that for entrepreneurs, that's actually a huge relief. You used to think that you're going to have to come up with all the ideas yourself. You used to have to think that it's all on you. And in many ways, the mindset of taking on the responsibility still exists, but you're not having to take on the weight of the world. I recently spoke at a leader, a high level financial company here in Toronto. And when I went into the room, the ones that were in the room was the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, and a series of developers and architects. And when I spoke to the team, the CTO came up to me after and she said, I loved that you shared the idea of co-elevate, because sometimes I feel like I'm the least smartest person in this room. There's super smart people in this room. And sometimes it's nerve-wracking to think that they're looking at you to make the decision. So the idea that it's not up to you, but it's up to us results in why, when some of our clients during the pandemic time, they asked the team members what they want done during the pandemic time to help them accommodate. And what was interesting is some of them raised up their hands and said, I'd actually like to be home with my family. I'm okay with you laying me off. This is actually a good problem. And they realized that was actually a benefit for some people. So hearing out people and co-elevating them is important. The second half of that is a line that I often believe in, and something I believed in long before resilience or caregiver was even a meaning to me, is shaking the hands for the purpose of listening, not to introduce yourself, but for listening. And when you go in with that mindset, whether it's a networking event or whether it's meeting someone, be it a team member or someone in your community, if you're going in for the purpose of listening, I would say it's very much like you in this podcast show, Trevor, is you're going in to get to know who they are on a level that others are just not willing to take the time to do. And if you really care, and I mean genuinely care, where you want to allow yourself to truly understand this person in every way from their stories, you're going to realize that the relationships that you build, whether it's employees or customers or community or my wife and I actually got to know a lot about ourselves in a relationship by working together. You're going to realize how all other areas, all other KPIs, and even revenue targets start increasing in alignment with the level of care that you put in. So I hope it's good news when people hear that you don't need to be the hero, but just someone who cares, because I think it's a lot easier to do. And to be honest, a lot more fun when you get to co-elevate as a group of people and a unit every step of the way.
I think that's such a important example, like a tangible example of caring is listening, right? Like because care can be kind of a buzz, like kind of an empty word, let's say, not being entirely fair, but to be able to demonstrate caring with a tangible action that people can say, okay, listening and active listening, like actually being engaged. But I think, and I want your kind of perspective on this, is business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, a big part of what they're doing is decision making. And those decisions are heavy. Very often they're heavy. We keep coming back to the pandemic, and that was a time of really heavy decisions for a lot of different people. And the decisions that I make as a business owner are going to not align with the best outcome for people. Like, it might negatively affect some of the people around me. And I think there has to be a distinction between listening, caring enough to listen and truly listening, versus giving the misperception that by listening, it means that I'm going to do what you're saying. Right. And I think that is a dichotomy, a challenge for business owners all the time, that I have to make this decision that is going to be for the best outcome of the business, which I need to do, but is going to negatively affect some of my team who I genuinely, truly, passionately care about. But how do I demonstrate that care when this is going to have a negative outcome?
Yeah, I really like that perspective. And I think it's worth addressing the question of how do you know someone truly cares versus how do you know someone is doing it because maybe it looks good in their sustainable page of their website. Like how do you, people that are actually doing green initiatives versus for the sake of good press, it's kind of like one of those things. And the truth is, a lot of this does come down to recognizing patterns that people have seen in your leadership. Those little 1% tedious moments that you often think no one is paying attention to, but they truly are. I remember many years ago when I was working my way up the digital marketing ranks, and my direct manager, Daryl Keyser, someone I've worked with for the last 13 years, it was an incredible opportunity for me to really assess what he's like for a leader, like as a leader, someone that I get to see every single day for 13 years. And it's in those moments where a client complained and he went to bat for me, not the client. And scenarios where you think he had every right in the world, where he should have either been firing the employee or at least speaking out of anger, yet he stayed calm and kind. You start recognizing those, and somewhere in your memory bank, you build this pixels, this persona of who that leader is, that whenever there's a tough decision being made, what tends to happen is that you start oozing empathy. You're like, right. I really understand what he's going through because I know deep down he's a good person. And people often talk about gut feeling or he's a right fit when they're hiring. But the truth is, it's those micro patterns that gives you the sum of your perception of who that person is. And the more that you start being aware of that, I think first and foremost as a leader, you start paying attention to your behaviors, not just in the high moments that makes the spotlight, the big news or the award that you win, but more importantly in those 99% of micro moments where every time you don't think someone is watching, they're actually paying attention very much and subconsciously remembering their takeaway from that event. I used to serve coffee at this oversaturated Tim Hortons. It's my life was built around, and entrepreneurship lessons, I assure you, was built around serving coffee over there. And one of the things I remember is what a person once told me, that integrity is who you are when no one is watching. And I always remember that because it used to come down to such silly things. Like sometimes I would sweep the floor and I would think like, you know what, no one's going to look at that corner. Like, why bother? I can skip it and no one will ever bother. And then I do walk away only to come back 15 seconds later to clean it up because there's a part of me that's feeling like integrity, integrity, And I always remembered that. And so I think the awareness that doing the right things, even when no one's watching, even when it doesn't make it on someone's LinkedIn reflection of what a great leader you are, I think those baby steps add up a long way. And if you do it the right way, when you're making those tough decisions that you mentioned earlier, Trevor, it's going to come with a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding and probably a lot of support in making that decision, because they truly understand that even bad news is sometimes not, even the bad news sometimes is the best news that you could have probably delivered in that scenario.
Let's get back to your journey a little bit. So coming out of business school, you had you realized, or you understood, you had a passion for kind of that marketing piece. What was your business path after university? Where did that? Because I want to dive into kind of these smaller, more artistic initiatives, less economic initiatives, and kind of get a sense of what you're doing there. But what was that initial coming out of business school path for you?
The initial plan was to scratch that curiosity bug that I had around what is it like to do more creative work. And I realized that the quickest way to do that was to join a marketing agency to start working with clients. So I immediately jumped on LinkedIn and I looked up some local agency owners that I think would have given me a shot based on what I know and who I am. And although I didn't have any experience, I had a very, very embarrassing looking blog, one that I deleted and buried off the archive because I never wanted to be found again. But I'll tell you, as bad as it looked, I was really good at getting traffic to that website. I was really good at using SEO and storytelling in my blog writing, and being able to go into these interviews and show off the analytics and show off my writing style ended up getting me my foot in the door in an agency known as Candy Box Marketing, which was a very startup back in the days. As a matter of fact, I was the first hire for the agency. And since then, I've been able to taste delivering marketing business growth initiatives with clients every single day for the last 13 years with that agency. And I've kind of worked up with building up that company. And now we're a team of 40 full-time employees that delivers on these strategies every step of the way. Along the way, as I've been able to taste what works well for our clients and what doesn't work well for other businesses, I've been able to utilize those learnings to launch my own business initiatives. And one area that I absolutely adore is the ability to share great stories on platforms like getting up on a stage or a podcast show. So I started doing that initially as just out of sheer passion of wanting to share my ideas and my learnings with others, but eventually led to a beautiful road that became a full-time revenue as I started getting better and as I started building my personal brand more. I've been able to get to a point where the speaking fees and the amount of events that I do really do allow me to have a independent focus on just keynote speaking, while still not losing sight of the agency work, just because I like the idea that the agency work gives me real-time ideas to share back on the stage. So it kind of feeds itself, which I think has been a fantastic opportunity. So along the way, I got to tell you, one of the reasons I love your show, Trevor, is you allow people to get on this platform and be very, very open and vulnerable and really talk about some of the darkest moments. And I realize that I also enjoy sharing those sides of me where I'm able to do that while speaking on stage. But what I realize is that when I'm speaking on stage, there's a lot of entrepreneurs and even a lot of students that hear my story, maybe introverted and shy like me, that doesn't raise their hand up during the Q&A part of the talk. But when I stick around long enough and I'm packing my bag and I'm about to leave, they come up to me after and they open up about their darkest stories and some of the things that they've gone to that's very much relevant to me, such as not doing well at school, not knowing where you want to go. I've had very, very conservative parents that had their romanticized version of my career path that goes down somewhere in the pockets of being an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And a lot of them ask me the same question, which is, how do I convince my parents this isn't what I want to do? And I started to open up about that area of my experience and my perspective with publishing a book which shares my journey of getting through those barriers, and then speaking on stage, and then starting a podcast show. And I think that it's given me a new drive that I haven't thought about a lot before, which is, how do I take the personal, maybe even traumatizing experiences and convert it in a way where entrepreneurs realize that there are things that you can take away and apply practically for your business. But on a deeper level, it transforms you into the type of person that can do it well and do it for a very long time. So it started becoming the first time, I would say, that I've really tasted bringing in my personal passion of wanting to help the community and wanting to help through deeper conversations, but also monetizing it for the first time, which I would say was the hardest part. But fortunately, both of them rise and fall at the same time. Maybe not fortunately about the fall, but fortunately, they do rise at the same time, I have to say.
So tell me a bit about your capacity, your appreciation, your ability to manage failures as you kind of endeavor on these various business paths. Like, was that ever, has there been, kind of a point where you've looked at something and said, why did I even start this? Or what do I do with this based on where it is? Whether it was kind of before you got to where you are with the successes kind of on that path, or something that you've now put to bed and are not pursuing anymore.
Yeah, I probably have more failures than this time today will allow us to talk about. But if I could maybe highlight a couple notable ones, one of them came out of what I would say in reflection. It came out of the fact that I wanted to chase a high of a trend. I saw that we saw the major growth of Clubhouse starting to take over, and podcasters and audio lovers and storytellers like you and me probably really appreciated that. And I saw the opportunity of building a community of speakers that I would schedule around the clock to come in their scheduled time and do a show, a 1-hour audio show on Clubhouse. And I would say I did a really good job on recruiting. I did a terrible job on marketing. So we had a lot of people that wanted to speak and no one that wanted to listen. And all of a sudden you had all these people going in and speaking at 1 or 2 room people. And it was behind a membership platform. And I was paying out to get these speakers to commit their time. And I found out very, very quickly that this business model is an absolute failure. And I also started realizing that the speakers didn't love the idea as much as I did. So the hardest part was, I still remember on orientation day when I brought all these people that would be supporting me and even the volunteers that would be managing the back end. And I did this big speech. I did. I talked about the moonshot and what it's all about. You break the unbreakable, and I created this vision of what the group could be. And I remember I got everyone fired up. And I have to tell you, the more I got them fired up, the harder it was for me to go back and tell them that this idea is an absolute, it's absolute trash. And I'm going to have to take away everything I said. And the reason I think it bothered me was less to do with the business failure and more to do with the guy that I am. I like hyping up things that I really do believe in. And I did believe in it at that time. But going back and now losing that trust with them, the ones that I really am close to, it was a very difficult conversation to have. However, I was very fortunate to transition those relationships into other areas of the business, whether it was my speaking or my podcasting. So right. I can't say it resulted in an ultimate failure. But I have to say, Trevor, like when I look back at the idea of failure and being numb to it, it's not to say that if someone pinched me hard enough, I would say pinch harder. It's not to say I enjoy the feeling of pain. What I realize is this, if I kind of pocketed all the different things that I do, right? I do the marketing agency side. I have published books that I make money off of. I speak on stage. I do consulting on the side. I have a e-commerce store that generates revenue. And I have probably a lot more minor things that I'm not even describing in this list. What I think of them are as spinning plates, right? And they're all spinning at the same time. And if entrepreneurship and that one business, let's say it was the agency, was my only thing that I was focusing on and none of the other plates, what tends to happen is that when I come home and I say I had a bad day, it's because of that one specific business. I'll say, that day sucks. The client meeting didn't go well, or the sales didn't close, or someone got laid off, or someone quit. Like something could have happened that made me justify that the full 23 and a half hours of the remaining of the day sucked, right? Because it's that one plate that's spinning. When you have 7 plates, what I realize is the definition of a good day for most people is just one good thing happening in your day. You walked into a grocery store and you found a $20 on the ground. It doesn't matter how crappy or how much the rain is happening outside. You're going to find a way of saying this is the universe crying down with happy tears because you found a $20 bill. You find a way to justify that good day because one good thing happened. It's very likely that when you have 7 or 8 plates spinning, that there's going to be one good news coming in. As a matter of fact, there'll probably be 4 good news things coming in most cases. But it allows me to not lose sight of the things that I enjoy because those good news are coming in from one of the 7 lanes every single day. And so I set myself in a way where I realized that if everything works even at a 40 to 50%, which is an atrocious failure, the revenue justified in those 40 to 50% mark is actually enough to compare myself to one entrepreneur that's crushing it with one business. And when you realize that, you allow yourself to quickly drop those failed projects, those failed initiatives, so that you can start the next 7th and the next 7th and the next 7th, so that eventually you have that strong core 7 things that generate your income. So my encouragement to entrepreneurs, and I listed out 7 revenue generating items, but I also want to amplify that it doesn't all need to be revenue generating. It could be things that you enjoy. It could be about traveling. My wife and I, we have a traveling Instagram account. How much money does it make us? Probably negative 5,000 a year. Like we spend more money on tickets than we'll ever make. But I have to tell you, it makes it more fun. And I consider it one of the plates that I spin because a lot of good news happens when we go traveling. So I encourage people to find a bit more of a holistic purpose, going back to that word that goes beyond just what are revenue generators, but what are those things that makes more good news happen every single day for you?
Well, and then as you've pointed out, I mean, different initiatives feed other initiatives, right? And I think when you mentioned Clubhouse, I can imagine 95% of the listeners, so 4 of the 5 people, had to go and Google what was Clubhouse, how long did it last, and because that was a blip in time, that platform. But I also want to highlight that, I don't ask for about failures because I want this to be a woe is business and woe is us that do business kind of podcast. It's because genuinely that's where the lessons are learned. And that's where people who talk to other business owners miss out on the opportunity to learn from others' mistakes because we don't talk about it enough. We talk about all the things that are going well. When you talk to somebody in business, it's how's it going? It's awesome. And then meanwhile, we know what's happening behind the veil. And if we were more open about those challenges, the failures, the things that didn't work, well, why didn't it work? Right. And I really, and you shared a lot of that. I mean, it was, you're going after something that might perceivedly not be there, but also you're not sold yourself. Like your moonshot speech around the Clubhouse platform, like bringing all of these people together and kind of over amplifying, overselling. And then all of a sudden you breach that trust because now people are saying, well, were you really convinced yourself when you were selling us on this? Right. So those are great things for people to hear because those are the lessons.
100%. And that version makes me think about all the people that try to recruit you to their pyramid schemes once upon a time and how much you lose your trust in them or still, gosh, I can't tell you how many times a let's get together for coffee turned into the most atrocious pitch of my life. I have to tell you, it's tough. But the realization that they might have been themselves in the belief that this would work, and the fact that they lose the trust in those moments, and the fact that the next time they have a big idea, as glamorous as it is, brings an ounce of skepticism in every single person you share it with, because they know your historic patterns, those micro patterns that they caught on very early. But you shared some exceptional things in your last reflection around what failure is and the lessons you get out of it. And I think that, I kind of glazed over this Clubhouse thing a little bit too quickly because I wanted to identify a key takeaway, which is the reason something can fail, such as my Clubhouse initiative, had a lot to do with the fact that I was taking a shortcut. The fact that I had this shiny object syndrome that caught my attention. I was doing well with a lot of initiatives that I was really passionate about. The ones that I knew takes years of work, and I was willing to put in the work every day. But when I recognized that the Clubhouse was exactly that, you called it a blip, and that's exactly what it was. But it was a blip that I thought was going to be everlasting, and I thought it made sense to jump in early, and it almost made me abandon my game plan to chase that fun, shiny thing that I thought would change my entire life. It's like a lot of people that bought NFTs a few years ago, right? It's like you think that one move might have changed everything, so you almost abandoned your savings plan or your investing plan just to jump on that NFT ship. So I think it's worth noting that those shiny objects will come around more than you'll ever imagine, especially because of how easy it is for someone to get an idea out through digital advertising. They can put an idea in front of you every single day, and some of them are going to be appealing, and some of them is going to make a part of you get excited because it aligns with who you are and you see the opportunity. It's important to not lose sight of the core things that are working as well. So that way you're not betting the farm on the one decision. You're not taking a risk so large that you're traumatized and you just can't get back to where you used to be, but rather allowing yourself to have a little bit of gap, allowing yourself to have a little bit of breather to innovate and try risky things, but knowing that even if it crashed and burned completely, the idea of that failing doesn't take you away from your goal. It might have slowed you down by a month or maybe a year, depending on how extravagant the opportunity was, but knowing that it's okay, because if it paid off, it would just be another stack of your core initiatives that you're taking forward. So I think that mindset around learning from those failures and bringing yourself back to a elevated version of you is a very exciting part of entrepreneurship, because I feel like it betters you every single time you go through those experiences.
Yeah, and I think it separates the people who are entrepreneurial to their bone, to their core, right? Because they'll have that failure, and it won't be the thing that sidelines them from taking another risk or doing another thing, or and whether you're a serial entrepreneur or just that is part of your drive, that is part of your fulfillment, is not being disincentivized by a failure. I think that really separates the two camps. I have a standard question that I ask everybody, and I make sure I don't forget to do that. So if I were to say a hardest day in business, your hardest day in business, what comes to mind? Is there one that stands out, or a situation or a particular scenario that when I say that, it gives you a little bit of a PTSD or a reaction?
Yeah, I like to think this PTSD is so large that my memory is refusing to give me some ideas here to share and give you a good answer. Trevor, I'll tell you why I struggle with this one. And I would say I would have a very similar answer if someone asked me, what was the one thing that made your career?
Right.
Which is a question I was recently asked as well. And I think I struggle with both of them because admittedly, the multiple initiatives happening at the same time has put me in a very blessed position where I've never experienced something so crippling that all 6 or 7 items dropped at the same day. I would say every one of these initiatives had their fair share of failures. You know, I've had book deals that fell short. I've had keynote stages that I've done 4 or 5 major planning sessions with the organizers, only to find out they pulled the plug on me and I got paid nothing for all the work. I've had days where I looked at the balance sheet and it was a year of loss and not gain, and which is terrifying for any business owner when you have to pay salaries or expenses along the way. But fortunately, and I think there's a key takeaway in this very weak answer I'm giving you. I think fortunately, I haven't had a dying day or one crippling day, because the ability to build your armor with a diverse set of streams of income and a diverse set of opportunities that don't necessarily overlap with the suffering of one of them, I think prevents you from having those crippling days and really build on those opportunities. You know, you often hear statements like, you often hear statements like master, what is it? It's you learn everything, but you're the master of none.
Oh yeah, jack of all trades, master of none.
I hate that I forgot that phrase after saying it 20 times over the last month. But you know, jack of all trades, master of none. The core takeaway there is people that use that line to make you focus on one or two specific things and not just try to be kind of good at all of them. You know, we hear that we're in an era of multifaceted or multi-passionate people that can do a lot of things, and it's often being described as not a good thing. You know, it's going to make you not hit the targets. I've seen enough and I've lived enough in the world of doing multiple initiatives that I can tell you with full confidence that there will never be a time where one thing is driving the revenue. And one thing might be primary and more dominant, but not the one that is a make or break it. So as I tiptoed around this great question of yours, I wanted to come in with an answer that was honest and that was raw. And the truth is, I didn't have one that will overshadow any other bad days, because there's been a lot of good micro days as well.
No, that's awesome, and I feel bad that you felt like you needed a bigger, better answer than that. I think it's great. It's great that there's you know that there can be this opportunity for people to know that, you know, there's opportunity for balance between good and bad, and some of it is perception. Like honestly, I mean, you can't say that to some of the people who have shared some of their stories, and that question was framed out of one of my articles, one of my Business is Fucking Hard articles that I wrote about the hardest day that I had in business, and you know, some people are going to be able to reflect back and have a visceral reaction about one particular day, and that's not going to be everybody's story. So and that's great. So what's next for you, Mahfuz? What's on the plate right now? What creative ideas are you looking to get off the ground in the next little while, if you're able to share?
Yeah, I've been incredibly blessed this year, where I was given a rare opportunity that I've always dreamed of when I was failing and suffering in school, which was the idea of delivering a TED Talk. And I was very blessed this year to not being able to only deliver one, but 3 different TED Talks that I did over the last 12 months, and internationally, which was very, very a memory I'll never forget. And I've been seeing a lot of collaborative opportunities come out of those days, whether it's with the speakers that also shared the same stage as I did, or the viewers that are watching the videos that went online from the TED Talks. And it's opening up a lot of collaboration opportunities. And I don't say it lightly when I say that I'm such a big fan of your approach to raw conversations, Trevor, because a lot of those collaborations are being built on the backbone of sharing real stories and doing more of that. So I imagine that what's going to be coming around the corner is a lot more of these collaborations, whether it's through podcasting or other initiatives that are in the works right now, or whether it is about us collectively pouring into a organization that we believe in. But we see a lot of that happening as well. I've also started this initiative with my wife where we record a podcast episode only once a year to reflect on every year of marriage. And she's not into the world of podcasting or speaking at all, if I could say, but she happily gives me and suffers through it over the course of one sitting a year. That's the deal that I made with her. But it's been really fun. You know, we talked about the first year of marriage and we just released the second year of marriage. And I got to tell you, what I really love about it is exactly this, because relationships are fucking hard, you know, and marriage is fucking hard. And the realization that it does actually go hand in hand with your business. Like if that part of your life doesn't have a good grasp, or it doesn't have some synergy that aligns with business building as well, don't be fooled. By no means are they individual and isolated. There is so many overlaps in the emotions, the mindset, the confidence that goes in both avenues. And we've been using this podcast to actually reflect on the good, bad, and ugly that happens in every year of our relationship. So I've been very much enjoying that, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And I'm excited to continue looking for any pathways to have conversations like this. You know, you are one of the only 2 podcast interviews I've said yes to this year. And you know, with my work in the podcast space, especially working with the bank's podcast show right now, I've been given a lot of opportunities, and I say no to a lot of them. But you got a very quick yes from me for 2 reasons. You know, number one, you and I share a mutual friend with Hamza Khan, who I highly admire. And number 2, because your theme and even the name was like that heart racing archetype feeling that got me excited in university all over again, that made me say there's something here that I really want to talk about. So I can't thank you enough, and I assure you I've learned a lot, and a lot to reflect from in our conversation today.
Well, that's awesome, Mahfuz. I am the same. I'm learning so much with every conversation that I've had with folks. And I think there is value to that raw conversation, to not having too much structure to it, to letting it flow the way it's going to really just letting people share their stories. And I'm hopeful that there is impact for others. I know there's impact for others. I've had people reach out.
I believe it.
Yeah. So I thank you so much for taking the time and for allowing me to be one of the 2 that you said yes to this year. This was really great, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. This was awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you.